Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Mr. Gary Reason, formerly of the London Fire Brigade. So if Mr. Reason is there, would you ask him to come in, please?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Reason. Yes, please sit down, make yourself comfortable.
Thank you.
All right, we'll let you get organised and then we'll start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning, members of the panel. Good morning to you, Mr. Reason. Yesterday, when we finished for the day, we were looking at the training delivered to the station-based officers, which was developed and published in April 2014. Now I'd like to look at the training guide for the senior officers, please, and that is at LFB 30044. You can see from the foot of the page that it's dated the 22nd of August 2014. And we can go to page 7, please, and look at those, and those are the interactive slides. And they start there and they run through to page 12. If we look at page 7, while it's on the screen, you can see that it focuses on checking 72D visits conducted by lower rank officers. And then at page 8, if you go to page 8, you can see that that focuses on assessing and prioritising information as an incident commander. Page 9 on identifying flats and how line drawings might help. And then page 10 asks questions in relation to responding to FSG calls. And you can see some of the details there. Call slips, helping on the command unit, casualty information sheets, etc. And then page 11 is about asking questions about the location of the bridgehead, things like when would you move it, what would you need to consider before relocation of the bridgehead, and implementing and communicating your plan. And on page 12, if we can go look at that, those are questions about search and rescue operations, implementing, controlling and evaluating searches, etc. Now, that's a very quick tour of this document. As with the package for station-based personnel, there's no mention here, we've been able to find, of the risks of external flame spread, facades, facade fires, compartmentation, loss of it as a result of facade fires, or the dynamic risk management model. None of that appears to be the subject of this training package. Do you accept, first of all, that that is the case?
Same answer as I gave yesterday for the station-based package. I accept the first one, that the dynamic risk assessment element is missing from this package, but the whole concept and content of this training solution was to disseminate information to senior officers around the unusual and potentially rapid fire spread in high-rise buildings.
Right. And do you accept that to the extent that it failed to disseminate key lessons about dynamic risk management model, that was a failure to learn and to disseminate lessons from the Lakenhall House incident?
Again, a similar answer or same answer as yesterday. These packages tend not to be used in isolation, so this is the storyboard, if you like, of the Lakenhall House fire, and there is other training on the big learning system, and probably would have been discussed at this senior officer training session around dynamic risk assessment.
Yes, you said that yesterday, and I was wondering about that. In mechanical terms, as you say, there's other training on the big learning system. Those are hyperlinked, I think. Is that right, from this training package?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, so it would require either a station-based officer or a senior officer under this programme to operate the hyperlink and go and look at the policy or process. Is that right?
Yes, that would be true.
Would they get any guidance during the training sessions about which policies they should look at, which parts of the policies they should look at?
Well, the dynamic risk assessment policy is quite a succinct policy from my memory. And it would have been, I suspect, I wasn't at any of these senior leadership sessions, training sessions, but it would have been, I suspect, a core discussion point during the presentation. These sessions were obviously delivered by, I think, initially Deputy Assistant Commissioner Tim Cutball, who had been the lead officer for the investigation into LAC and also had a huge amount of knowledge about this particular incident. And he was supported by officers from the incident management training team when they were delivering this package, because we recognised that senior officers would be obviously interested in the incident itself and how it developed, but also some of the more significant issues for command and control for senior operational staff.
Right. But by putting all the hyperlinks to all these policies in this training package, you were, is this right, leaving it to the individual officers, whether station-based for their package, which we saw yesterday, or for more senior officers for this package, really to do their own homework and find the time to self-study using the big learning package as a resource?
Yes, I'd accept that.
Right. When would station-based staff, just going back to them, find the time to do that, or the inclination to do that?
Well, station-based training is managed by the watch manager for the respective watches at the station. As I think you've already heard from other witnesses, there is a core programme of training across the risk-critical areas, which includes incident command, and it would be for the watch managers to decide, based on their own training needs analysis of their own teams, when and how that training should be delivered and on what frequency.
Right. So that would, just thinking about that answer, would that mean that the frequency and intensity of using big learning at station-based level would be uneven across London?
It could be uneven, but that's not necessarily a failure. It might be a facet of the local risk environment in which those watches are likely to work in. So one of the things that we encouraged station-based staff through the management structure within service delivery, which was Dave Brown's directorate, was to look at local risk, and that informed the borough training plan and then the management structures from the borough commander down to the station managers and watch managers at station to tailor their training programme in addition to the core risk critical, which is mandated through a policy, right, to link to the local risks within their local communities.
So would it work this way? And indeed, both at station-based level and officer level, I call it officer level, senior officer.
Yeah, senior officers.
Level.
Senior officers are slightly different because senior officers, by definition, there's a lot less senior officers than there are frontline firefighters at fire stations. And depending on what qualifications and what we call attributes, if they've got a specialist skill set like press liaison or fire safety, they could be covering, in effect, the whole of London. So they would undertake personal development across the whole suite of incident command training policies to maintain their proficiency in being deployed at that level.
Yes. That I understand, but are you telling the inquiry that in fact at station level it was left to the individual watch managers or station managers to decide which elements of big learning in the training package would be used?
To a certain extent. I know you've heard about the Operational Directorate Coordination Board work, which often led to a station training support package in a particular theme or issue. They were mandated, so that wasn't left to the local managers. That was something that the organisation decided was an issue that we wanted to either highlight or we wanted to improve performance in that area. But it's not just the watch managers working in isolation. They have a senior officer, station manager, who looks after the whole station, so is managing across all 4 watches at that station. And then above that person, there is a borough commander. All of those have responsibility for managing training and the performance of their staff. And Dave Brown will be able to talk in more detail about the quality assurance processes in place, but there was an independent quality assurance process within service delivery. So each fire station would be visited, I think, at least once a year by an independent audit team. And one of their key focuses would be the training activity at that station, both in terms of what's been recorded and what's being planned and how that training is being delivered.
Right. But well, we may pursue that a little bit further later with you or with AC Brown when he comes to give evidence. Can I just ask you, though, based on your second witness statement, you say if we can go to the second witness statement, LFB 30678646, please, at paragraph 55, page 27, you say this. You say, in addition to the above, over a 2-week period between 20th and 30th of May 2014, the watch managers who were filmed and appeared in the case study delivered the case study package to their respective watches. I'm not aware that any further revisions to the case study were made as a result of these sessions. However, I believe that prior to its release, Tim Cutbill also delivered the case study package to the senior management team, which included the Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner and Directors. I would have been in attendance for this presentation, but cannot recall the exact date. Do you remember whether any comments or concerns were raised at that stage, either by you or the Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, when the case study package was delivered to you?
No, I don't remember any issues being raised. I think we were, as a group, I won't speak for the others, but I was certainly impressed with both the content, the style, and the approach taken in the case study, because it was very interactive, which is obviously a much more engaging training development tool than just watching a PowerPoint.
Right. Did nobody ask why it didn't cover the full range of the coroner's recommendations?
No, I don't recall anyone raising that issue.
Why didn't you yourself, at that stage, raise the package's failure to incorporate things like the dynamic risk assessment?
I don't remember the specific meeting itself, but again, similar to the answer I gave before, I'm aware through my own self-development and training that I've done is dynamic risk assessment is really at the core of what you do as an incident commander. So it features in virtually every incident command training course. When you do events and training sessions, it is the core element that informs your decision-making process. So it's very well embedded within the organisation as a process to manage incidents. But
we've seen what the coroner said about it. The question is, at this stage, this is late 2014, it was one of those things that was not present in the package and therefore not reinforced. So is what you're saying that it didn't need, the Brigade had taken the decision that it didn't need to be, or you were satisfied that it didn't need to be?
I don't think it was a conscious decision not to include it. This case study was just one component of a range of training solutions that were developed in the immediate aftermath of the Lakenhall House fire. So whilst we acknowledge that it is one of the 7 specific issues the coroner raised, there was other training solutions that had been rolled out before this package was delivered to stations and to senior officers, which would have also covered the dynamic risk assessment issue.
Did anybody gather all these training packages up together at this point or indeed any other point and ask themselves the question, do all these training packages taken together cover properly all of the coroner's recommendations?
I certainly wasn't aware that process, as you described, was undertaken, but I think everyone was alive to the issues in the Coroner's Rule 43 for obvious reasons, and there was a significant body of work done both in terms of policy development, development of new training, development of new equipment and new procedures to address all of the issues that were identified by the coroner. So the answer to the question is no, I don't think it was done, but there is the context is it was in the context of there was a lot of other training solutions and other policy and equipment developments that had been happening in the immediate aftermath of the Lakenhall House fire.
Yes, but would you accept that, as you put it, there was the significant body of work being done in terms of policy development, development of new training, new equipment and new procedures wasn't all being done by one department or one person. It was being done by different people in different departments across the brigade.
Yes, I'd accept that, but you'll also recall that there was the Lacknell House board in the initial aftermath of the fire, which was chaired by the Commissioner, which would have, the attendees at that board would have covered all of the departments that were working on, organisational improvement and looking at new equipment. So there was a forum where if there was any concerns that what one department was doing was not quite covering what someone else was expecting them to cover, then it would have been raised through the Lacknell House board and possibly subsequently at the Lacknell House working group.
Well, that's the point. Lacknell House board predates the recommendations.
Yes, yeah.
It's only the Lacknell House working group that is there to essentially oversee the carrying into effect of the Rule 43 recommendations. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Yes. And therefore, the only oversight being given holistically to all of the recommendations is through that process, the Lacknell House Working Group and its reporting.
That's not strictly true, because the Rule 43 pro forma that was created to share with elected members at the Lacknell House Working Group also was reviewed by the Operationals Directorate Coordination Board. Again, the constituent members of that board covered, I'm just checking that I'm being accurate here, but yeah, they did cover all the heads of service that were working on aspects of this Rule 43.
Yes, it's the pro formas we're going to come to. We've already seen
Yep.
before. But that's the only, am I right in thinking that's the only holistic oversight?
Yeah, ODCB was where we'd agreed corporately that we would review the Rule 43 developments.
Yes, and that would then be reviewed in turn by the Lacknell House Working Group.
Yes.
So that everyone's clear about these labels.
Forward, yeah.
Now let's look at paragraph 61 of this same witness statement, if we can, Mr. Reason, please. If we go to page 28, we can see that at 61 you are answering the question in italics whether the training was evaluated, and if so, when. And you say this: beyond the business as usual training processes that I've detailed in paragraph 30 and 31, I don't recall this case study training package being specifically evaluated prior to my retirement in January 2015. However, under any underperformance in relation to high-rise incidents and training involving high-rise scenarios would have been picked up in the 6-monthly ODCB reports produced by the Operational Assurance Department. High-rise incidents and high-rise related training scenarios were not uncommon, so any underperformance would have been picked up through the ODCB monitoring process. Now, given the significance of the Lacknell House incident, do you know why consideration was never given to evaluating the training package or otherwise ensuring that operational staff had learnt and embedded all the lessons of Lacknell, including external fire spread risks of failure of compartmentation, and the dynamic risk management model?
Well, as the paragraph 61 says, the training was rolled out starting in, I think it was July and August 2014. I think we gave stations and senior officers approximately 3 months to complete the case study. And then there's always a kind of legacy period where you then start to see whether the investment in this training has delivered the desired outcomes in terms of performance at high-rise incidents. And as it says there, high-rise incidents sadly are not unusual, particularly in London. So we do get quite a body of evidence in terms of performance. Any incidents at high-rise fires that have escalated beyond the initial attendance, the normal predetermined attendance, would be attended by the operational review team, which is a dedicated cadre of officers that look at the performance. And this would have clearly been a focus for the operational review team to look at high-rise incidents once this body of training had been implemented, to see if it had started to have the desired effect.
Right. I think is the answer to the question then, and in fact you retired essentially too soon after the rollout.
To see this potential intelligence coming from the body of information that we captured about our performance at incidents and training, it was probably too early for me to see that coming through to ODCB.
I see. Now, as I've shown you, in the second part of the paragraph, you go on to say that any underperformance would have been picked up in the way you say. In summary, are you telling us that the case study wasn't subject to a specific evaluation exercise per se, but if there'd been problems with its content or problems with it, with carrying its content into effect, then those would have become clear via the ODCB and DIOT mechanisms.
Well, I think there's a stage before that. So, as you know from evidence you've heard already, this Tcap was subject to a training commissioning process with a commissioning department, and in fact, DAC Tim Cutwell was heavily involved in developing the content with Babcock because of his subject knowledge of the incident itself. And therefore, in essence, the signing off process of the Tcap is an assurance process in itself, that it's actually the training is delivering what the learning objectives were set out in that particular Tcap. Obviously, the kind of level 3, level 4 evaluation, as I call it, is can you measure that the intended outcome has been embedded within the staff that this package was aimed at, and then that's a level 3, which is what the assurance process in Dave Brown's directorate would have been aiming to achieve across all training, but of course including high-rise related issues. And then the level 4 is really where the ODCB management information is used to see if the desired, if it's been embedded in the staff, is it having the desired outcome when we're actually attending high-rise operational incidents.
Two things flow from that. The first is you refer to the Tcap commissioning department and the sign-off. That's a paper exercise, isn't it, or is there a pilot?
My understanding is there's always a pilot, and I think, as I said earlier in this statement, I'm aware that the officers that were involved at the incident, some of the junior officers, saw an early pilot of the case study, and they delivered it to their teams who would have been at Lakenhall House Fire, most of them, and that was part of an additional process we did for this, because there had been so much input by the station staff and the people, the junior officers that attended this incident. They were very passionate about making sure that their colleagues in other parts of London would learn from this package. And I don't know if you've seen the package, but I think all of the incident commanders, right up to Assistant Commissioner Steve Chirrick, who was the final incident commander of this large fire, they all contributed actually as a talking head video clip on the package, and that was something that we hadn't previously done, I don't believe, and that's because the people who are involved in Lakenhall were so passionate about making sure their colleagues from other parts of London who may not have been aware of the detail of the incident, other than what they've seen on telly, that they could learn from the officers that were there's own experience.
Yes. The second thing that flows, I think, from what you've just said is you referred to level 3 and level 4 evaluations. I think Mr. Groves told the inquiry that those were not done in relation to this package. Do you know? Are you able to help with that, or was that after your time?
I can tell you what was in place when I was head of training. So we used the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation, which is a level 1, level 3, level 4, level 5. We never achieved level 5 because that's societal improvement, which was very difficult to measure. But I certainly believe that we had a level 3 evaluation, which is linked to the assurance processes, which I've touched on. Dave Brown will be able to provide you with much more detail about the assurance processes for training that was going on within his directorate. And the level 4, I believe, given the principle of what level 4 evaluation is trying to achieve, is looking at organisational improvement, which is what the function of ODCB was.
Now, the final sign-off of the Tcap, if we go to LFB 3067857, please, we can see the date. We just have that up. There's the first page of it. But if we go to page 37, we can see the final date of the sign-off of this Tcap was, there it is, May 2016. You can see the signatures. There's AC Cutbill signing it on the 17th of May, DAC Fenton on the same date, and some further signatures below that. And Babcock, I think, on the 31st of May 2016. So that's about 18 months after the date of the package that we saw, and in fact 2 years after the station-based package, April 14. Now, let's look at your first witness statement. you say at page 17 in that, and that's LFB 30324747, paragraph 51, you say in the penultimate sentence in paragraph 51 that the training package was launched for station-based operational staff in August 2014. Well, we've seen that. Are you able to tell us why the Tcap form wasn't signed off as closed and completed as at that date, August 2014, and why there was a delay until May 2016?
No, as I said yesterday, I wouldn't have seen the Tcap when I was working. I've only subsequently seen it in preparation for giving evidence at this.
You see, going back to what you told us earlier, when I asked you whether the ODCB and DIOT mechanisms would have been the mechanisms through which any problems with the content or delivery would have become clear, you said there was a stage before that, which is the Tcap commissioning and sign-off. But it looks from the chronology that the station-based training, April 2014, and the senior officer training, August 2014, happened 2 years and 18 months, respectively, before the Tcap commissioning sign-off. So it wasn't a stage before that. This was looks like a stage after that. Are you able to help?
Well, in terms of the chronology of the administration, yeah, I can't disagree with that because that's what the dates say. But I can reassure the inquiry that, and Tim Cutbill used to work for me before I retired, that he was heavily involved in this as a subject matter expert for the Lakanal House fire. The training did get delivered on the dates that I put in my statement. I checked that obviously before producing my statement, and so the evaluation of the improvement that was intended would have started to flow through, 3 months after staff had started to clean. So this probably isn't, I don't know, I'm only presuming this is probably an administrative issue rather than an issue that has indicated that the training wasn't delivered.
Right. So between April 2014 and January 2015, when you left for the station-based training, and August 2014 and January 2015 for the senior officer training, would I be right in thinking that any problems with that training package, as it became rolled out and embedded, would have become obvious, or should have become obvious, to the Operational Assurance Department, who were to pick up poor performance trends in training?
Training and at incidents, yeah.
And at incidents, yes.
Incidents, yes.
But I'm talking really about the training and how this package was being received. So would I be right in thinking that during that period, the ODCB's IMPD report would feature any trend in failure by station-based staff or officers to learn from the package?
Yeah, that's how that process works. Right. So that report you've just described is informed by a whole raft of intelligence and management information, including direct observation from officers that have attended and the operational review team that assess performance. Yes. So it would have featured if there was any issues that had been captured.
Right, and you sat on the ODCB, I think, at this time.
Yeah, up until the date I retired. I sat on the ODCB from the whole period that I was Assistant Commissioner from 2008 till the time I retired in 2015.
Were you aware of any IMPD reports being produced by or for the ODCB which identified a trend either among station-based staff or officers of any problems with embedding these training packages?
Not at the time. By the time I'd retired, high-rise issues had been highlighted. I think I put that in one of my statements over the life since ODCB had been created, which was 2006 from memory. High-rise and high-rise related issues had featured, not regularly but periodically during the life of that process. But certainly in respect to this particular piece of training, it wouldn't have really, there wouldn't have been a body of evidence built up by the time I retired.
Now, can I then turn to Babcock's review of incident command training against the 7 incident command recommendations? We saw those listed in the Rule 43 letter yesterday.
Yeah.
Can we go to the pro forma, please, which is at LFB 3034062, page 22. Now, we looked at this, I think, yesterday. This is the document that you'd received from, I think, is this right, from is it Tim Cutbill,
No, this is you recall yesterday we discussed this. This was the working draft
Yes.
that I facilitated to be produced for the Commissioner so that he could respond to the Coroner's Rule 43.
Indeed, and I thought you told us yesterday it was given to you, collected up by Assistant Commissioner Cutbill, and then
No, it was
you.
sorry. The person that pulled the information together from the heads of service was Glenn Seabright, who was the head of communications.
Seabright. Now, looking at A and B on this page 22, and looking particularly at B, you said there, the LFB will engage with our training contractor to ensure the points specifically listed in recommendations 1 to 7 are addressed in the current review process of incident command training. This work will aim to ensure that the training provided enhances performance across the range of required skills and knowledge needed to support effective incident command. The Brigade will also introduce a case study which will incorporate the learning outcomes from Lakenhall House and from other high-profile high-rise incidents such as Shirley Towers, Hampshire, and Harrow Court, Hertfordshire. Now, if we go to your first witness statement, you tell us, well, before I ask you that, can I just confirm something? Peter Groves told us that the reference there to current review process was a reference to Babcock's 3-year initial course review process, or ICRP. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's go to your first witness statement, please, page 7, and let's look together at paragraph 28, if we can. You say there, towards the bottom of your screen, that at the inaugural meeting of the LHWG, the Lakenhall House Working Group, was held on the 24th of July 2013. At this meeting, the initial work programme, as outlined below, was agreed. The names in the brackets indicate the officer who had responsibility for leading on the item, and then you set them out there. You can see that the first one was ongoing updates on the progress of the Lakenhall House review, also victim support. Both of those were yours. And then at the foot of the screen, foot of the page, incident command developments. You were also tasked with reviewing all the developments relating to incident command that the Brigade had implemented following the Lakenhall House fire. Do you remember why that was identified as one of the 6 priorities for the working group's work programme?
Because the primary function of and focus of that working group was to look at the Brigade's response to the specific elements of the Rule 43 plus other issues that the group eventually wanted officers to look at and report on.
You told us earlier, I think, that it was your responsibility to provide the members of the Lakenhall House working group with a Rule 43 monitoring report at every meeting. The first iteration of that action plan monitoring report was, I think, is this right, prepared for the Lakenhall House Working Group's September 2013 meeting?
Yeah, if that's the inaugural meeting, then that would have been the first meeting I took that report to.
Yes, well, let's look at the document and see what you recall of it. It's within the agenda pack for the September 2013 meeting, and it's at LFB 3067820. If we can go to that, please, page 11. We'll start with page 1, just to identify the document. This is Lakenhall House Working Group. It's your Exhibit 32, Monday 30th of September 2013. And item 3, update on progress with the Brigade's Rule 43 action plan and covering note, Director of Operational Resilience and Training, that's you. And if we go to page 11, which sits within that item, here we see what we call the pro forma, and we looked at this, I think, yesterday. Action update, August 2013. You see that?
Yes.
In the far right. And if we start at page 13, I think I'm right, am I in saying that this is the updates in respect of the actions intended to address the coroner's recommendations on incident command? Yes?
Yes.
And on the left-hand side of the page, under item 3, you can see the text which says this: the Brigade review its policies and procedures concerning incident command, having regard to whether it is effective for the choice of the IC to be tied closely to the number of or types of appliances attending an incident, and be given and training be given to ICs to enhance their training in relation to the following. And then if you turn over to page 14, please, you can see that on the right-hand side, in the column, we've got the Brigade's Rule 43 actions. And I just want to focus it on the action in the bottom row. We can go back to page 13. In the bottom row, page 13, there's a B under LFB action, review incident command training to ensure the 7 points are adequately covered. You see that?
Yes.
And in the last column, the August update says this, still on page 13. Babcock have recently completed a full review of incident command training, and a draft course review report was received by officers on 2nd of August 2013. This is now being considered and will inform revisions and improvements to the suite of incident command training solutions. They're just pausing there. This is, am I right? This is the report arising out of Babcock's 3-year course review relating to incident command.
That is correct.
Right. Now, we'll come back to the Babcock Incident Command Course Review shortly, but just sticking now with the August 2013 monitoring report delivered to the Lacknell House Working Group at the 30th of September 2013 meeting. Sticking with this, the remainder of the update, if we go over just at the bottom of the page to start with, and then we'll go over the page, officers also instructed Babcock to confirm that all 7 incident command related recommendations are sufficiently and, if we turn the page, comprehensively covered within the existing suite of training courses. Babcock has confirmed that all 7 issues are covered in the existing suite of command training, albeit that there may be opportunities to emphasise the Lacknell event during some inputs. This will be discussed at the next Incident Command Forum meeting, which is scheduled for the 5th of September 2013. First, do you remember how, when and how Babcock gave you that information? Gave you the confirmation that all 7 issues are covered in the existing suite of command training?
I haven't got the date, and I wasn't the officer that received that report. I think I've seen certainly a document that reflects, I think, the work that Babcock did in preparation for this, but it wouldn't have been a document I would have seen. It would have gone to the commissioning department who had put that action in the original Rule 43 response to the coroner. Was
that Glenn Seabright, or no, was that somebody else?
No, Glenn Seabright was really the kind of administrator and not the author. He was just putting the information together from the heads of service and commissioning department.
Oh, okay. So who was it?
Incident Command sat within AC Cotton when she was head of service for operational assurance.
So we're looking, are we, for a confirmation by Babcock to AC Cotton that all 7 issues had been covered in the existing suite of command training?
Yeah, or someone in AC Cotton's department that was managing this piece of work. Yeah.
Right, I follow. Thank you. Do you remember whether the Rule 43 review was documented?
What, this piece that responding to the 7 items specifically?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen a document in reviewing information for this. For preparing myself, which was a similar table to this, but with a list of all the courses where Babcock covered the 7 items. And I assume that someone in AC Cotton's department would have assessed that for, currency, suitability and completeness before before I was given this update.
Yes, I think I know what you're referring to. We maybe come to it. I think that's Babcock's proposal. Is that right? It's not
it may be that document, yes.
Right, well, we'll look at that shortly. We'll come back to that then. Now, Mr. Groves told the inquiry that Babcock had often had difficulties delivering incident command training due to a lack of subject matter expertise. First of all, would you agree with that observation?
There were difficulties with design and development around certain curricula, and incident command was one of those in the early days of the contract. Yes, I agree with that. That
being so, was any consideration given by you or at ODCB level, or indeed at LHWG level, to undertaking a review internally, either within the training department or the operational assurance department, or perhaps a combination of the both?
Well, in effect, the way the commissioning process worked was the Operational Assurance Department would have assured themselves that the 7 items, as detailed by the Coroner's Rule 43 recommendation, were covered in existing and to what extent they were covered. And I think the mention of the Incident Command Forum was something we introduced not long after the contract was awarded, which was a kind of another meeting, but it was specifically around discussions around incident command to try and assist Babcock. So there wasn't a view corporately or even by myself that we should do a further piece of work with Babcock, because I would have expected, and I do believe that there was evidence provided to the brigade through that, that by the virtue of that update's been given to me, that piece of work had been done by the Ops Assurance Department, which was the commissioning department for this piece of work.
Just a couple of things which flow from that. If we can go back a page, please, just to page 13. I'm just focusing on what's said there. Babcock have recently completed a full review of incident command training. My question was any consideration given to undertaking that review within the LFB, either through the training department or operational assurance, or both? That was my question.
No, not at that time.
Right. So how did the LFB have oversight of or involvement in Babcock's Rule 43 review that's referred to there?
The course review element of that, or the response to the 7 items being covered in existing training? Which element are you?
Well, I'm referring to the recent completion of the full review of incident command training.
We wouldn't have had direct involvement, because in the contract, as I think Mr. Groves covered in his evidence, that a part of the contract was for all course curricula to be reviewed within the first 3 years, and obviously incident command was one of the main course curriculars that we were interested in. And I saw the 2nd of August 2013 course review report, and it was a very comprehensive piece of work from Babcock with, I think from memory, about 38 recommendations relating to how Babcock could improve the provision of incident command training, and that's what I took to the course review board, which I subsequently set up, I think, in early 2014.
Right. Now let's look at the Tcap form for 0124 at LFB 403716. Tcap 0124, and the title is Enhanced Incident Command Training Based on Lacknell Inquest's Rule 43 Recommendations. First, is that the document and process that facilitated Babcock's Rule 43 review?
Yes, I believe so.
Right. And then if we go to page 3, we can see from the version control statement here that the form was first raised on the 3rd of June 2013. At least that's the date of the first draft. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And if we go to item 12 there, we can see that the last draft and sign-off was on the 10th of August 2016. Now, if we go to page 5 of the Tcap form, you can see background and context there. You see that? And the background and context sets out, about halfway down your screen, the 7 recommendations by the coroner for LFB incident command training.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Then if we go to the bottom 2 paragraphs, just read with me, if we can scroll up. It says this, after the 7-item list, with respect to the points specifically listed above in 1 to 7, these need to be addressed to ensure the training provided enhances performance across the range of skills required. In particular, recently published / revised policies below, Babcock are expected to provide a proposal detailing the changes to courses to achieve a greater and enhanced level of incident command training than is already delivered based on the points 1 to 7 above. Now, why were Babcock only asked to make a proposal which covers changes to existing courses?
I only saw this document in preparation for this hearing, so probably not the best witness to ask that question of.
Who would be?
Someone from the commissioning department, so maybe AC Cotton
Right.
can answer that.
AC Cotton. Right. To the best of your knowledge, doing the best we can with what you know, why was no thought given to creating or instructing Babcock to create a whole new training course or exercise that focused on the specific, or each of the specific 7 points?
I think looking at the 7 points in detail, obviously I'm well aware of what they were and are. As it says there, that the initial review and our understanding was that all of these issues have got training solutions embedded within incident command training or other training solutions. So there wasn't anything new in the 7 points that we weren't already providing training. So there wasn't an absence of training in any of those areas. So the focus was, I suspect, what can we do better in terms of the existing training provision to embed the issues that have been highlighted there with the 7 points that were raised by the coroner.
Wasn't there a problem with that? And although one can understand that you wouldn't want, as it were, to reinvent the wheel, wasn't the problem that the coroner had identified through these recommendations that the wheel wasn't working, and therefore you needed a new wheel?
I don't necessarily accept that's what the coroner was recommending. This is one fire in amongst, probably hundreds of fires relating to high-rise around that period. Obviously not all as tragic as Lakanal, thankfully. So it may reflect that the officers in attendance at Lakanal, given the nature and the challenges they faced, didn't perform as we maybe would have liked against these 7, or because of the nature of the fire was different to what we'd seen previously, were caught slightly unawares. I don't think there was a systemic problem across these 7 issues, and that comes from me as being the director level, but also as a very experienced operational incident commander for 30 odd years. There's always lessons you're going to learn at incidents, particularly the ones that are the outlier incidents that are, are very challenging and unusual. But I certainly had a sense, both corporately and personally, as a professional fire officer, that we were doing all of this stuff, and of course there were lessons to be learned because of the scale and nature of the Lakanal fire that we wanted to share with other colleagues.
You say at the start of that last answer that the Lakanal House fire was one fire in amongst probably hundreds of fires relating to high-rise around that period. That can't be right, can it? This was a particularly a particular fire which had caused the death of 6 people, an inquest, and had been, on the face of it, taken with the utmost seriousness by the LFB, to the extent that you'd established a working group before the inquest, and after the inquest, another working group to take into account the Rule 43 recommendations. We haven't seen the same exercise done in relation to any other fire. So would I not be right to say that Lakanal House was a milestone event in the LFB's history?
Yeah, I would describe it as a significant event in the Fire Brigade's history, but yeah, I'd agree with the sentiment of that comment.
Yes, and given that the coroner had heard 3 months of evidence and had produced carefully constructed Rule 43 recommendations, which set out 7 specific points, which were the subject of training to be given by incident commanders and potential incident commanders to enhance performance. I come back to my question. Given that, why not just create or think about creating a whole new training course or set of exercises focusing on the kinds of problems which emerged at Lakanal House, rather than seeking to improve existing training, which, as you could tell, had not worked or was defective?
Well, there's 2 elements to this Tcap. There's the assessment of how well the brigade was covering these 7 issues, and we've touched on that already. And the second part was where we could identify new opportunities through reconstructing some of the existing incident command assessment materials. And what I'm talking about there is the command decision-making exercises, the tactical decision-making exercises, and the incident command exercises, which are practical exercises, role-play exercises, and that's part of this solution. It's not in this section of the Tcap, but it is in this Tcap. And then the final part of the jigsaw, which I hope answers the question, is the Lacknell House case study itself. Notwithstanding, I accept that the dynamic risk assessment element of it wasn't embedded within that case study, but there were other materials available for those sessions covering that topic. But the case study itself was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was to try and cover all of these issues in a practical context, showing a real incident that firefighters and officers had dealt with at the Lacknell House fire.
But the case study came later, didn't it? The CDE came later on, I think.
Yes, I thought that's what you were going to draw my attention to with the kind of chronology of dates at the start of the document. Is this was a kind of a work in progress. So the case study was just one element, which is why the whole of the Tcap probably wasn't signed off till much later, because some of the tactical decision-making exercises and command decision-making exercises had not been changed at that point, and obviously that was done over a number of months and possibly years to get all of the existing training material. I think there were, from memory, I think there's 16 tactical command decision-making exercises that were in the portfolio that Babcock offered the brigade at that time, and a number of those, I think, from memory, and this is from memory, so apologies if it's not exactly accurate, I think 6 of them were chosen.
You're right.
Which had high-rise sort of features, and they were the ones we were going to focus in on to kind of develop a narrative and to kind of explore some of these issues with the delegates when they undertook that training.
Nonetheless, I come back to my point one more time. Given the importance of the fire, given the Rule 43 recommendations, given the structure established in the LFB to carry them into effect, why not simply create a whole new training course, whether or not it used parts of old training that had worked in the past, but that focused on particular things that had arisen at Lacknell, rather than seeking to improve existing training?
I can only repeat what I've said. I believe the Tcap for this particular case study is trying to achieve that, exactly what you've just said.
Now let's look at the Babcock proposal at LFB 3038170. This document is dated, I can tell you, the 19th of September 2013, and it's called Tcap number 0124, Enhanced Incident Command Training based on Lacknell Inquest's Rule 43 recommendations. First of all, do you remember this document?
I wouldn't have seen this document. I didn't see the processes relating and documents relating to Tcaps. So
right.
I've only seen this in preparation for giving evidence today.
And who would have signed this document off?
It would have been, part of Peter Groves' team, but primarily it's the commissioning department's job to evaluate any proposals from Babcock in relation to new training or revisions to training.
Now, let's look at the opening paragraph. It says this: a review of the current incident management training provision directly relating to the areas identified by the 7 Rule 43 recommendations has been undertaken. The purpose of the review is to confirm current practice and to identify areas for improvement to meet the requirements of Tcap 0124. And then it says the review considered the following incident management courses, and there are 9 set out below, covering crew managers through to deputy assistant commissioners and above. Yes?
Yes, I recognise those courses, yeah.
Yes. And then in the last paragraph on this page, just if we can scroll down, it says this: the following table gives a broad overview of the outcomes from the review process in terms of the areas identified for improvement and the proposed solutions to enhance training. And then if you look into the table, it says on the left-hand side, learning outcomes, and then as a findings column, existing learning outcomes are in need of revision to ensure the training is tightly focused and addresses the outcomes required for each Rule 43 recommendation. And then if you look at the second row under action training, new learning outcomes have been written for each one of the 7 Rule 43 recommendations. And then if we look over the page 2, at the second page, we can see from the first column that relates to training provision. And Babcock's findings are, under the second column, as follows. Existing training provision was either explicit or implicate, it should be implicit, I think, across the different roles. Some received dedicated theory and practical training. For other roles, it depended on the exercise scenario they are exposed to as part of the training as to whether or not all areas relating to the Rule 43 recommendations were covered and assessed. And then in the row below that, underneath it, next to the words exercise scenarios on the left-hand side, it says this. As mentioned above, existing exercise scenarios were found to be in need of revision to meet all areas of the Rule 43 recommendations. And then in the column to the right of that, it says this. Suitable exercise scenarios have been identified and core and supplementary injects written, aligned to each role and covering the identified LFP policies and procedural notes to ensure delegates' knowledge, understanding and ability is tested by application in addressing the incident command challenges posed by each of the exercise scenarios. And I've read a lot of that to you, Mr. Reason, but in summary, and I know you didn't see this document at the time, but in summary, is this right to the best of your understanding? Babcock reviewed the incident command training against the coroner's 7 recommendations and discovered that although the content of the recommendations could be said to be contained within the incident command training, it was at times implicit, not tightly focused, and whether any individual received the relevant training would depend both on their rank and on the exercise scenarios they happen to be exposed to as part of their training.
I agree to that summary of what I've just read. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if we go to page 3 of this document, in the second paragraph below this table, page page 3, yes, thank you. Page 3, training proposal. In the second paragraph, but in this text, it says this. Tcap 0124 requires enhancements to incident command training based on LACNL requests, Rule 43 recommendations. The 7 recommendations relate to areas of incident management training that, although currently delivered through existing training, require enhancement to meet the Tcap requirement. Now, again, was that the same reason, namely that training was often implicit, not tightly focused and uneven?
I think you could make that inference from that statement based on what's gone previously in this document, yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, as the rest of this document goes on to detail, particularly at page 14, well, let's look at page 14 if we can go to that. Would you accept that Babcock's proposal for the enhancement was to develop some command decision exercises, or CDEs, which would specifically address each of the coroner's 7 areas of recommended incident command training?
I haven't read the whole of that page, but
right.
Just quickly scan reading it, that appears to be what they're proposing, yeah.
Yes.
Command decision-making exercise.
Right. Now let's go back to your. But just before we leave that document, you said it was signed off by or prepared by the commissioning department. As at this time, which is September 2013, just could you remind me, if not tell me, who that was?
It was AC Cotton.
That was AC Cotton,
the head of that department.
Yes. Now, if we go back to your August 2013 monitoring report prepared for the 30th of September 2013 LACNL House Working Group meeting, that's at LFB 30067820. We go back into the pro forma and look again at it, page 14. Page 14, yes, and there we can see in the second line, in the right-hand column, I read it to you before, I'll read it again. Babcock has confirmed that all 7 issues are covered in the existing suite of command training, albeit that there may be opportunities to emphasise the LACNL event during some inputs. Now, Mr. Reason, having now seen Babcock's proposal for Tcap 0124 of the 19th of September 2013, would you accept that what is said there is not quite accurate? Babcock's conclusion wasn't that there may be opportunities for emphasis or enhancement, but that existing training requires enhancement so as to meet the coroner's 7 recommendations.
Yeah, I agree that the wording could be more explicit to reflect that statement, yeah.
And therefore, as at the 30th of September 2013, when you were providing this update to Lacknell House Working Group members, the training did not in fact cover those 7 issues, did it?
Well, I think it did cover them. What we were saying there is there were opportunities to improve the training to reflect and improve the areas of the 7 items raised by the coroner. So there was, as I said earlier, there was no absence of training in any one of those 7 areas, but clearly it was our intention through Babcock contract to improve the training that we already offered. But
in fact, as we've seen, the proposal did not say that it was covered for all incident commanders. It depended on whether they were exposed to the exercises or not.
I think at every level, going back to that list in the Tcap, there is high-rise exercise for crew manager, watch manager, all the way up to brigade manager. And certainly I'd done a few of the exercises and they did involve high-rise related incidents. So my understanding is that there were training opportunities involving high-rise for all levels of command in the brigade.
Yes, but just because it's a high-rise incident doesn't mean that it's automatically covered. In other words, doesn't mean that it automatically meets the Rule 43 recommendations.
Well, it covered, as it says there, all the issues are covered, but we accepted, and I hope it's conveyed, obviously not as explicit as you would have liked, but that we were working to improve in the areas and take every opportunity to embed the learning that came from the Lacknell House incident.
Yes, I mean what you've just said isn't quite reflected by the language of that sentence, is it?
No, I said that the update could have been more explicit in respect to the position as it was currently in the date this was written.
Yes, and in fact, the way this is presented in this document significantly dilutes what Babcock had actually said.
I don't think it was ever an intention to dilute it or mislead members or the members of ODCB. I think the people that are involved in this would have been very much on top of the issues and what was the intended outcome. And there's certainly no lack of intent or ambition to improve the training across all of the issues that are highlighted in this particular Tcap.
No, but there may have been an intent or ambition, not perhaps to expose the commissioning department or the LFB more generally to the LHWG in the sense of revealing to them that the existing training wasn't quite as good as it should have been.
I don't think there was any deliberate intent to mislead or misinform the Lacknell House Working Group. That's not the relationship we had with members. They were very robust in their scrutiny of officers, as I think you've heard from other witnesses. And certainly we had a very good dialogue at the Lacknell House Working Group. I had a very good working relationship with the chair, and there was certainly never an intent to mislead the group. There would be no point. I mean, we are the officers that are going to have to turn up and take charge of these incidents, so it's in our interest as well that we have robust training in place to prepare us for that challenge.
Can you explain why you didn't make clear to the Lacknell House Working Group that, in fact, Babcock's conclusions, as you agreed with me earlier, were that the existing incident command training was at times implicit, not tightly focused, and uneven, in the sense that any given individual might or might not get their training depending on their rank?
Well, I was very much dependent on the updates I got through ODCB. Obviously, if I felt they weren't robust enough or I needed more information, then I think you've probably seen emails from me that have pushed back on some of the updates that we got through during the life of this particular committee, because I was the one that had to face members and answer the questions. So again, I hadn't seen that Tcap response. I would have been taking my cue from the information I was given.
Yes, and I mean, had you seen that Tcap response, can we take it that you would not have allowed the text such as this to appear in this action update?
I would have probably been a little bit more careful about expressing it slightly differently, yes.
Yes, and can we take it that you never yourself took steps to verify the findings of Babcock's Rule 43 review or ask anybody in your own directorate to do so, as against what Commissioner Cotton was giving you? Well, Assistant Commissioner Cotton.
Yeah, Assistant, as she was then, Assistant Commissioner Cotton. That was the job of that commissioning department. I wasn't going to check on every piece of work. I mean, I had big job, and I was, like all the top managers, were very busy, and we relied on our heads of service and their teams that work for them to do this work, and I had no reason to doubt, based on my meetings with AC Cotton and what I saw was going on at my level, that this was being progressed appropriately.
You say you had no reason to doubt, but standing back, did it not ever strike you as unusual or odd that the Lacknell House coroner had heard evidence which caused her to recommend improvements to LFB's incident command training in these 7 specific areas, and yet Babcock's summary, having examined them, was that the existing training was, to paraphrase, largely fine, subject to certain enhancements which had been identified? Did that not strike you as peculiar?
Not peculiar. As I said earlier, I don't think there was any complacency in the approach we took. We certainly took the recommendations extremely seriously. The Commissioner, by virtue that he'd set up his own working group prior to the inquest, I think shows the ambition and the intent of the organisation, and that was driven through all heads of service. There was no doubt that we'd experienced a significant and tragic event that was beyond what we'd probably